The expedition set off at dawn when the sun of Zenora appeared above the horizon, bathing the landscape in that strange purple light that Jack still found disturbing even after many years. In this alien world, 12 figures moved cautiously in tight formation through the untamed wilderness, 5 humans, 4 Eastern Blue people, and 3 representatives of the Northern tribe, who had arrived the day before with maps and ancient knowledge of the mountain trails. Jack checked his equipment one last time, assorted his hip a pack containing survival supplies and the specialized breathing apparatus Marcus had designed for the humans to use in the potentially different air composition they might encounter underground. The weight felt reassuring, familiar after countless expeditions into Zenora's wilds. Lyrie walked beside Jack, her oxygen system recently modified by Marcus to be more compact and durable. The canister on her back was smaller than previous versions, the mask replaced by a thin tube that delivered oxygen directly through her nostrils. Her blue skin had a healthy sheen in the morning light, and her amber eyes were alert, scanning the terrain ahead. Nervous? Jack asked quietly as they navigated a rocky outcropping. Lyrie glanced at him, her markings pulsing slightly, a sign of contemplation he had learned to recognize over their years together. Not nervous, curious, she adjusted the straps of her pack, her movements economical and practiced. The Northern guides, they look at me strangely. Jack had noticed this too. The 3 blue people from the Northern tribe, 2 males and 1 female, had indeed been watching Lyrie with an intensity that bordered on uncomfortable. He had initially attributed it to their cultural stance on those with her condition, but now he wondered if there was something more to their interest. If they make you uncomfortable, stay close to me, he said, his hand instinctively moving to his knife hilt, an old habit from when Lyrie had been smaller, more vulnerable. Lyrie made a sound that Jack had come to recognize as her version of a laugh, a soft trilling noise that originated deep in her throat, always protecting Jack. I can handle myself. To emphasize her point, she patted the knife at her belt, a beautifully crafted blade given to her by the Eastern tribe's weapon master on her last naming day. Force of habit, Jack admitted with a smile, remembering the frightened child who had crashed into his legs years ago. That child was gone now, replaced by a confident young adult who could hold her own in most situations Zenora threw at them. Their conversation was interrupted as Torval, the Eastern tribe leader, raised his hand for the group to halt. They had reached the base of the Crimson Mountains, where the forest gave way to steep rust-cold slopes dotted with sparse vegetation. The mountains loomed above them like sleeping giants, their peaks disappearing into the perpetual mist that shrouded Zenora's upper atmosphere. The entrance lies 2 hours. Climb from here, Torval announced, his deep voice carrying easily in the still morning air. The path narrows. We proceed in single file. He nodded to the Northern female, Sheila, who would lead this segment of their journey. Her knowledge of the mountain trails was reportedly unmatched, passed down through generations of hunters and explorers. As they began their ascent, Jack noticed one of the Northern males, Naren, the youngest of the 3, continuing to steal glances at Lyrie. There was something in his gaze that didn't read as hostility, but rather as recognition, curiosity. Jack made a mental note to keep an eye on him as they climbed higher into the mountains. The climb was arduous with narrow ledges and loose scree that threatened to send the unwary tumbling. Down the mountainside, Jack's muscles burned with exertion, but years of survival on Zenora had hardened him. Against physical discomfort, each step was carefully placed, each handhold tested before bearing weight. A fall here would mean more than injury. It could jeopardize the entire mission. Lairi, despite her respiratory challenges, kept pace admirably, her movement sure and confident on the treacherous terrain. Jack felt a surge of pride watching her navigate a particularly difficult stretch. Gone was the wheezing, struggling child, replaced by a young woman whose determination had overcome the limitations of her physiology. The red rock beneath their feet was warm to the touch, retaining heat from Zenora's twin suns, even as the air grew colder with altitude. Occasional gusts of wind brought strain, metallic scents down from the higher peaks, odors that had no equivalent on Earth and still seemed alien to Jack. Despite his years on this world, by midday they reached a plateau where Sheila indicated they should rest. The vista from this height was breathtaking. The forest they had traversed stretched out below them like a purple-green carpet, while ahead the mountains' higher reaches beckoned with mysterious shadows and formations. As the group settled, drinking water and sharing dried provisions, Jack noticed Naren approaching Lairi with hesitant steps. His hand instinctively moved to his knife, but Larry gave him a reassuring glance that said she could handle the interaction. Your markings, Naren said to Larry in the Blue People's language, his voice low but carrying the mountain air. They matched the Kyrian pattern from the high valleys. His own markings, Jack noticed, had a similar configuration along the neck and forearms, though with subtle differences. Lairi tensed visibly, her fingers pausing over her water flask. I wouldn't know. I was taken from my family before such things were explained to me. There was an edge to her voice that Jack rarely heard, the bitter reminder of her abandonment by the northern tribe. Naren's markings pulsed in what Jack had learned indicated distress or regret. Not all of us supported the old ways, he said, carefully, his amber eyes earnest. Some of us fought against them, some of us searched for the lost ones. Before Lairi could respond, Sheila called for the group to resume their journey. Naren retreated, but the exchange left a palpable tension in the air. Jack moved closer to Lairi as they continued their ascent. What was that about? He asked, quietly, adjusting his pack to better distribute its weight. I'm not sure, Lairi replied, her amber eyes troubled as they navigated a steep section of trail. But I think he knows something about my family. Her voice caught slightly on the last word. Family had always been a complicated concept for her, torn between the birth parents she never knew and the human guardian who had raised her. The revelation hung between them as they continued climbing higher into the Crimson Mountains, the air growing thinner and colder with each step. Jack's mind raced with possibilities. Could Naren truly know something about Lur's origins? After all these years, could answers finally be within reach? The trail grew narrower as they ascended, in some places barely wide enough for a single person to pass. One section required them to press their backs against the mountain face an inch sideways along a ledge, the drop below them dizzyingly steep. Jack kept a watchful eye on Lyrie during these passages, but she navigated them with the same confidence she showed on easier terrain. They reached the cave entrance as Zenora's primary sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the mountainside. The opening was unremarkable, a dark fissure in the red rock face barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side, yet there was something about it that made Jack's skin prickle with unease, an ancient stillness that seemed to emanate from the darkness within. The records speak of this place, Shella said, her voice hushed with reverence, the mouth of the world where the surface breathes into the deep places. Torval produced several torches, lighting them with a striker. The flames cast dancing shadows across the cave walls as they ventured inside. Jack had expected the temperature to drop further as they entered the mountain, but instead a warm, humid air greeted them, carrying unfamiliar scents, something mineral and vaguely organic, like wet stone mixed with an alien musk. The ancients spoke of the breath of the mountain, Sheila explained, noticing their surprise. Now we feel it ourselves. The passage descended steeply, requiring them to brace against the walls for balance. The rock beneath their fingers felt oddly smooth in places, as though worn by countless hands over millennia. Water trickled down the walls in some sections, forming small luminescent pools that provided just enough light to supplement their torches. After what seemed like hours of careful descent, the narrow tunnel opened suddenly into a vast chamber that drew gasps from every member of the expedition. The transition was so abrupt that Jack had to blink several times, convinced his eyes were playing tricks on him. After the confined space of the tunnel, the ceiling soared hundreds of feet above them, its surface embedded with thousands of crystal-like formations that emitted a soft blue glow, illuminating the chamber without need for their torches. Massive stalactites hung like silent sentinels, their surfaces glittering with embedded minerals unknown to Earth science. The floor sloped down to what could only be described as an underground sea, a body of water so vast that its far shores were lost in shadows. The water itself seemed to pulse with subtle illumination, glowing organisms just beneath its surface, creating patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid light. The lake of stars, whispered one of the northern guides with reverence. We thought it a myth. Jack stood transfixed, his mind struggling to comprehend the scale of what they were seeing. Nothing in their briefings had prepared them for this hidden world beneath the mountains, beautiful and alien in equal measure. As they stood absorbing the sight, Larry suddenly stumbled forward, her hands flying to her head. Jack was at her side, instantly steadying her with a firm grip on her arm. What is it? Is it your breathing? He asked urgently, already reaching for the emergency medical kit Marcus had insisted they all carry. Lyrie shook her head, her markings pulsing rapidly in a pattern Jack hadn't before. No, I hear something like singing, but not with voices. She looked up at him, her amber eyes wide with a mixture of wonder and confusion. Jack, something's alive down here, something's watching us. No sooner had she spoken than a disturbance appeared on the lake surface, ripples spreading outward from a central point about 50 yards from shore, then another and another. The expedition members drew closer together, instinctively, weapons readied against whatever might emerge from the water. Rose figures that defied expectation, Blue people, yet clearly not. Their skin was a paler, more translucent blue. Their limbs elongated with webbed fingers and toes. Their eyes were larger, entirely amber without whites. And what Tovel's people called marking patterns covered their bodies in complex, glowing designs that pulsed with changing light. Lake people breathed. Sheila, her voice a mix of awe and fear. The deep dwellers from the ancient stories, the lake people formed a semicircle in the shallows, their movements fluid and graceful in a way that reminded Jack of Earth's dolphins. One step slightly forward, clearly a leader, it opened its mouth and emitted a series of sounds, clicks, trills, and resonant hums that echoed through the chamber. We cannot understand, Tovel called out, stepping forward cautiously. He repeated the message in the blue people's language, then gestured to indicate communication. The lake person tilted its head, then emitted another series of sounds. Its markings began to pulse in patterns, growing brighter and more intricate. To everyone's surprise, Lyrie gasped and stepped forward, her own markings beginning to glow and pulse in response, something Jack had seen only rarely, and never with such intensity. Lyrie, wait, Jack began, reaching for her. I can understand them, she said, her voice filled with wonder. Not the sounds, but the light patterns, their language. I can feel what they mean. The lake people reacted with visible excitement, their own patterns glowing brighter as they communicated with Lyrie through this unexpected method. For several minutes, Lyrie stood transfixed, her markings pulsing in complex sequences as she conversed with the water dwellers. Jack watched in amazement, his hand still hovering near his weapon but his stance relaxing slightly. The lake people showed no signs of aggression, their attention focused entirely on Lyrie and this unexpected communication. Finally, she turned back to the expedition, her face alight with discovery. They've been waiting for us, she explained. They knew we would come. They've been changing the weather patterns above to make a search for answers. They caused the climate shifts. Sarah asked sharply, her bow still half raised. Why? Lyrie turned back to the lake people, her markings pulsing with inquiry. The leader responded with a complex pattern that made Lur's expression grow grave. Their world is dying, she translated, her voice now somber. Something about the ancient systems failing. They need help from the surface dwellers. Our knowledge combined with theirs. She paused, receiving more information. They want to show us something. We need to follow them into the water, Marcus asked skeptically. Adjusting his glasses, we're not equipped for underwater exploration. The lake people's leader seemed to understand this concern without translation. It gestured along the shoreline where a path became visible, leading around the edge of the vast lake. Apparently they would travel by land, at least initially. As the expedition prepared to follow this new path, Jack pulled Larry aside. How is this possible? How can you understand them? Lur's expression was a mixture of confusion and wonder. My defect, the thing the northern tribe cast me out for, it's not a defect at all. These marking patterns, they're more than decoration, they're communication, connection. Her amber eyes seemed to glow in the chamber's blue light. The northern tribe lost this knowledge, but my body remembered. She touched her own markings wonderingly. I think this is why I was different. Jack squeezed her shoulder gently. You were always special, Lyrie. Now we're just learning another reason why the expedition followed their lake. People guides along the shoreline, the path occasionally dipping close enough to the water that spray dampened their clothing. Jack noticed that some of the lake people kept pace with them by swimming parallel to the shore, their movements through the water so effortless they seemed to be flying. Rather than swimming, the path led them along the lake's edge for miles, descending deeper into the mountains. Hard, the air grew increasingly humid, and Jack noticed that Lyra seemed to be breathing more easily, even reducing her oxygen intake, whatever gases composed this underground atmosphere appeared more compatible with her physiology than the surface air. "How are you feeling?" he asked during a brief rest. "Better than I have in years," she admitted, adjusting her oxygen flow to its lowest setting. "It's like my lungs were made for this air." Marcus overheard and approached. His scientific curiosity piqued. Fascinating, the higher humidity, combined with whatever gas composition exists here, seems ideal for your respiratory system. He glanced at his portable analyzer. Oxygen levels are similar to surface levels, but nitrogen is significantly reduced, replaced with something my equipment can't identify. Lyra took an experimental breath without her oxygen assistant, her chest expanding fully for perhaps the first time in her life. "It feels right," she said simply. Jack watched her with mixed emotions, joy at seeing her breathe freely, yet a strange unease at how natural she seemed in this alien environment. It was another reminder that despite their bond, she was fundamentally different from him in ways that extended beyond the color of her skin. Eventually, they reached what could only be described as a settlement. Structures that appeared to be grown rather than built, rising from the rock in organic curves and spirals. The buildings glowed with the same bioluminescence as the lake, creating a city of living light. Lake people moved about, some emerging from the water, others entering it. Children with oversized eyes darted between adults, their markings glowing with simpler patterns that Jack somehow intuited were expressions of youth and playfulness. "They've lived here all this time," Sarah murmured, her usual stoicism momentarily overcome by wonder. An entire civilization beneath the mountains. The leader guided them to a central structure larger than the others. Unlike the surface dwellings of either humans or blue people, the architecture here had no straight lines or angles. Everything curved and flowed, mimicking natural forms. The entrance was an oval opening that contracted slightly as they passed through, like a living thing responding to their presence. Inside, embedded in the living rock, was something that defied easy categorization. Not quite machine, not quite organism. It pulsed with internal light, tendrils of something like circuitry extending from it into the surrounding stone. Parts of it moved with subtle rhythms, like breathing. "What is that?" Jack asked, his voice hushed despite himself. Lur's markings began pulsing rapidly as she communicated with the leader. Her expression shifted through surprise, confusion, and finally understanding. "It's a heart," she explained to the others. "Not a literal heart, but a control center. It regulates everything. Water flow, air composition, temperature." She gestured to the tendrils. "Those extend throughout the mountain range, connecting to similar nodes. Together they form a system that maintains the planet's balance." Technology, Marcus asked, approaching cautiously to examine the strange apparatus, his scientific curiosity overcoming any apprehension. Not as we understand it, Lyrie replied, her hand hovering near the pulsing center but not quite touching it. It's partly grown, partly built. The first inhabitants of this world created it, long before humans or even the blue people existed here. The Lake People's leader made a series of gestures and part of the central node open, revealing an internal chamber where the light pulsed with increasing irregularity. Faster in some sections, sluggish in others, the rhythm disrupted and chaotic. It's failing, Lyrie translated, her voice tight with concern. Parts of the system have already shut down. That's why the weather patterns are changing above. If it continues, both our world's surface and underground will become uninhabitable. Can they repair it? Sarah asked, always practical even in the face of the extraordinary. More communication through pulsing patterns, Lur's markings glowing brightly as she engaged in the light language. Her expression grew increasingly troubled. They've tried, but they're missing crucial knowledge. The system requires input, for lack of a better word, from all the world's peoples. The Lake People have maintained their connection, but the surface blue people lost their knowledge of it generations ago. And humans, she looked at Jack, humans were never part of the original design. So what do we do? Jack asked, the implication sinking in. This wasn't just about unusual weather patterns anymore. This was potentially an extinction-level threat to all life on Zenora. Before Lyrie could translate the question, their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from outside. One of the expedition members, Tam, who had remained at the settlement entrance, rushed in, his normally composed demeanor shattered by urgency. Emergency communication from the colony, he gasped, holding up a portable radio. Political upheaval in the northern tribe. The leadership has been overthrown. The three northern blue people looked at each other in shock. Naren stepped forward, his markings pulsing rapidly. Is it Kalen? Has Kalen taken leadership? Tam nodded. Yes. How did you know? Because we are part of his faction, Sheila explained, her markings pulsing with what Jack had learned indicated excitement or urgency. We have worked for years to change the old ways, the culling practices, the rejection of those with differences. Her gaze shifted to Lyrie. The three of us were chosen for this expedition, not just for our knowledge of the mountains, but because we represent the new thinking. Lyrie stared at them, her posture stiffening. You knew what would happen while we were down here. We hoped, Naren admitted. Timing was uncertain, but yes, we knew change was coming. He stepped closer to Larry, his expression solemn. There is something else you must know. The patterns you bear, they are from my family line. My sister's child had these same markings. His voice faltered. You are Kira's daughter, my niece. We thought you lost forever. The words landed like physical blows. Lyrie stared at him in shock, her markings pulsing erratically. My mother, you knew my mother. She was brave beyond words, Naren said, his own markings glowing with emotion. When the elders demanded you be cold due to your breathing difficulties and unusual markings, she and your father fled into the mountains. We helped hide them, but there was a rock slide. His voice broke. We found their bodies, but you were gone. We believed you perished with them. Jack watched as Lyrie absorbed this information, her entire understanding of her origins transformed in an instant. She was not abandoned or rejected. She had been fiercely loved, protected until her parents' last breath. The knowledge seemed to shake her to her core, her markings pulsing in chaotic patterns that reflected her inner turmoil. They died trying to save me, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. And many others like you, Sheila added gently. Your parents' defiance inspired a movement. For years, families have been hiding children with differences, helping them escape to the eastern tribes or other safe havens. Now with Kaelin's ascension, these children and their families can return openly. Jack felt his own emotions churning as he watched Lyrie process these revelations. Part of him rejoiced for her to learn that she had been loved, that her parents had valued her life enough to sacrifice their own, but another part feared what this might mean for their relationship. She had found her blood family, her heritage. Would there still be room for him in her life? The Lake People's leader, observing this exchange, approached Larry and placed a webbed hand on her shoulder. Its markings pulsed in a pattern that made Lur's eyes widen. They say the children who weren't found by the eastern tribes often found their way here, she translated, her voice trembling. Some became part of the Lake People's community, some may even be like me. Bridges between worlds. Jack felt a complex emotion rising in his chest, joy for Larry's discovery of her heritage, fear that this new connection might draw her away from him, and wonder at the unfolding revelations that seemed to place her at the center of something momentous. The Lake People's leader made another series of gestures, pointing to the failing heart machine, and then to the expedition members. They believe we can fix the system together, Lyrie explained. The Lake People have maintained their connection to it, but lack understanding of the surface changes. The surface Blue people hold ancestral knowledge in their oldest stories that could help reconnect them to the system and humans. She looked at Jack with a small smile. Humans bring new perspectives, innovations that might adapt the system to our changed world. Three-species solution, Marcus mused, adjusting his glasses. Unprecedented. But first, Lyrie continued, her expression growing serious. We need to retrieve the ancestral knowledge from the northern tribe. With their new leadership, they might share what was previously hidden. Jack nodded slowly, his mind already working through logistics. So we split up. Some stay here to work with the Lake People. Others return to coordinate with the northern tribe. I should go back, Naren said immediately. I can speak directly with Kaelin. Ensure we get the information we need. I'll go with you, Sarah volunteered, checking her bow. We can move faster as a small group. As they discussed logistics, Jack noticed Larry had grown quiet, her expression troubled. He moved closer to her, stepping away from the main group. What's wrong? He asked softly. Everything is changing so fast, she replied, her amber eyes meeting his. My past, my future, who I am. Her markings pulsed with uncertainty. Jack, I've discovered my birth family, my origins. But you, she reached for his hand, you are my family too, the one who chose me when no one else would. Jack felt a tightness in his throat. I'll always be your family, Lyrie, no matter what you discover, no matter where this leads. He squeezed her hand. This isn't an ending. It's just our world getting bigger. her markings pulsed with what he recognized as affection. Our family getting bigger, she corrected, leaning briefly against his shoulder in a gesture that bridged their different cultures. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Sarah, Naren, and two others departed for the surface, carrying urgent messages about the system failure. Jack, Lyrie, and the remaining expedition members worked alongside the lake people, learning about the heart machine and its connected systems throughout the mountain range. Learning curve was steep. The technology, if it could even be called that, operated on principles that had no counterpart in human science. It responded to touch, to light patterns, even to emotional states. The lake people demonstrated how their marking patterns could activate different functions, how the system was maintained through a form of communion rather than mechanical adjustments. Lyrie proved invaluable as both translator and participant, her unique physiology allowing her to interface with the heart machine in ways neither humans nor lake people could achieve alone. Jack watched with a mixture of pride and wistfulness as she grew more confident in this role, more at home in this underground world. Marcus was particularly fascinated by the lake people's physiology, how they had adapted to underwater life while maintaining their connection to the surface. Their oxygen processing is remarkable, he told Jack one evening as they rested. They extract oxygen directly from water through specialized organs, and Lur's respiratory system has similarities. It's less efficient in our atmosphere but would work perfectly in their environment. You mean she could live underwater? Jack asked, surprised. Not exactly, but she could certainly spend extended periods there with minimal assistance. Her condition isn't a defect, it's an adaptation that simply didn't match her environment. Marcus shook his head in wonder. It makes me wonder how many other defects among the blue people are actually specialized adaptations to environments they no longer inhabit. Jack watched Lyrie across the settlement, deep in conversation with a group of lake people. Her markings glowed brightly as she communicated in their light language, a skill she seemed to master more fully. Each day, she looked at home among them in a way that stirred both pride and anxiety in Jack's heart. She's finding herself, Marcus said, following Jack's gaze. It must be extraordinary for her, discovering that the very thing she was outcast for is actually a gift. Yes, Jack agreed, extraordinary. He didn't voice the fear that lurked beneath his joy for her, that as she discovered more about her true nature, she might need him less, that the bond they had formed might weaken as she found others who shared her biology, her heritage. On the fourth day, disaster struck. One of the connected nodes in a distant chamber failed completely, causing a cascading effect through the system. Alarms, pulsing light patterns that Jack had learned indicated emergency spread through the lake people's settlement. Their leader gathered the expedition members quickly, explaining through Lyrie that a critical water management chamber was flooding. If it wasn't stabilized soon, the entire underground system could collapse, causing catastrophic sinkholes on the surface that would swallow portions of both the human colony and blue people settlements. We need to reach the chamber and manually restore balance, Lyrie translated urgently, but the path is underwater for nearly half a mile. We don't have proper diving equipment, Marcus objected, looking alarmed. The Lake people had anticipated this. They brought forward breathing apparatuses, organic-looking devices that somehow extracted oxygen from water. Lyrie examined them, then explained to the group how they functioned. They'll provide enough oxygen for the swim, but the pressure and cold will still be challenging, she concluded, demonstrating how to secure the devices over mouth and nose. I'll go, Jack said immediately. The thought of swimming through unknown underwater passages terrified him, but the alternative, allowing the system to fail completely, was unthinkable. Not alone, Lyrie countered. I'm coming with you. My body is better adapted to their environment, and I can communicate with the lake people. Jack wanted to object to protect her from danger, as he had since she first ran into his workshop years ago, but the determined set of her jaw told him this wasn't a battle he would win, nor perhaps one he should fight. She wasn't a child anymore, and her unique abilities made her essential to this mission. Within an hour they were prepared. Jack, Lyrie, Torval, and 2 lake people would make the underwater journey to the damage chamber. The breathing devices were secured, final instructions given. Water will be cold, Lyrie warned Jack as they stood at the entry pool. Follow my movements. The lake people know the fastest currents, the places where we can briefly surface for rest. Jack nodded, fighting back the fear that tightened his chest. He had never been a strong swimmer. Water wasn't abundant enough on Zenora's surface for much practice, but with Lyrie beside him, her confidence unwavering, he found his resolve. They entered the water together, the breathing apparatus fitting strangely but effectively over his face. The cold hit immediately, numbing his extremities. Even through the insulated clothing the lake people had provided, the underwater world was alien and beautiful. Glowing organisms, illuminated stone formations that had never seen sunlight, creating an ethereal landscape of blue-green shadows. Lyrie moved with surprising grace, her body seeming to remember movements it had never practiced. Lake people led the way, their webbed limbs propelling them effortlessly through the water. Jack struggled to keep pace, his muscles burning with the unfamiliar exertion. They swam through narrow passages where the rock walls closed in until they were squeezing through gaps barely wide enough for their bodies. Jack fought rising panic when his pack momentarily caught on a protrusion. Lur's calm presence beside him the only thing keeping him from giving into terror. After what felt like hours but was likely only 40 minutes of swimming, they emerged into a vast chamber where water filled only the lower portion. They surfaced, gasping despite the breathing apparatus, grateful for the chance to use their lungs normally. The damage was immediately apparent. A massive crack had opened in one wall, allowing water to pour in at a rate that would soon overwhelm the chamber's drainage systems. Beyond the breach, Jack could see the glow of another heart machine node, this one flickering erratically as water lapped at its base. The lake people conferred quickly, their markings pulsing in urgent patterns that Lyrie translated. We need to seal the breach, she explained. The node is failing because water is disrupting its connection to the central system. How? Jack asked, surveying the damage. The crack was at least 15 ft long and widening visibly as water pressure increased. One of the lake people produced a container filled with a viscous bioluminescent substance. A Sealant, Lyre translated, created from the same living material as the heart. Machines, but it needs to be applied directly to the breach, and the current is too strong now. Jack examined the chamber, noting a series of natural rock formations that formed a kind of scaffold near the damaged wall. If we could brace against those outcroppings, we might be able to approach the breach from above rather than fighting the current head-on. Toval nodded in agreement. A sound strategy. I can secure ropes to create a safety line. Working together, human ingenuity, blue people strength, and lake people knowledge, they created a makeshift harness system that would allow them to approach the breach while secured against the rushing water. The plan was for Jack and one of the lake people to apply the sealant while the others managed the safety lines. As they prepared, Lyre placed a hand on Jack's arm. Be careful, she said, her amber eyes intense. You've saved me enough times. Don't make me return the favor today. Jack managed a smile despite his anxiety. No heroics promise. Operation was grueling. The water's force was stronger than anticipated, threatening to tear Jack from his secured position with each movement. The lake person worked with methodical precision, applying the living sealant to the edges of the breach while Jack held the container steady. The substance seemed to respond to the rock, spreading and hardening with a life of its own. They had sealed nearly 2/3 of the breach when the chamber shuddered with a deep subsonic rumble. New cracks appeared in the ceiling, raining debris into the rising water. The chamber is destabilizing, Toval shouted from his position at the safety lines. We must finish quickly. The lake person increased its pace, the sealant now visibly struggling to adhere as the breach widened elsewhere. Jack strained to maintain his position, his muscles screaming with fatigue. A particularly violent tremor shook the chamber. Above Jack, a massive rock section broke free from the ceiling. He had only a moment to register the danger before Lur's voice cut through the chaos. Jack, above you. He looked up to see the falling rock, knowing he couldn't move quickly enough while maintaining his hold on the sealant container. In that frozen moment, he was certain these underground caverns would be his grave. But then Lyre was there, somehow having broken free of her safety position. She slammed into him with enough force to push him aside as the rock crashed down. Water and debris exploded around them, the safety line snapping under sudden strain. When Jack oriented himself, spitting water and gasping, he saw Lyre pinned beneath the fallen rock, not crushed but trapped against the chamber floor, with water rising rapidly around her. Lyre, he screamed, fighting against the current to reach her. Her head remained above water, but her expression was one of pain, determination. Finish the seal, she gasped. If the chamber floods completely, we all die. The lake person had maintained its position and continued applying sealant, but the task was clearly beyond one pair of hands. With agonizing reluctance, Jack turned away from Lyre and rejoined the effort, working with desperate speed to complete the seal, while Toval and the other lake person attempted to reach Lyre. The final section of the breach sealed just as water reached Larry's chin. The effect was immediate. The water level stabilized, then slowly began to recede. As drainage systems caught up with the inflow, the tremors subsided as pressure equalized throughout the chamber. Jack abandoned the sealed breach and rushed to Lur's side, Together with Torval and the lake people, they managed to leverage the rock enough for her to pull free. Her leg was badly injured, but her eyes were clear and determined. Did it work? She asked through gritted teeth. Jack nodded, cradling her against him. It worked. You saved me and we saved the chamber. Her markings pulsed weakly, but steadily. Family protects family, she said simply. Jack lifted her carefully, mindful of her injured leg. Let's get you home. Which home? She asked softly, her amber eyes searching his. Whichever one you choose, he replied, his throat tight with emotion. I'll be with you either way. They returned to the main settlement more slowly than they had departed. Lyrie, unable to swim with her injury. The lake people created a remarkable stretcher that somehow maintained buoyancy, allowing them to float her through the underwater passages, with Jack swimming protectively alongside. Marcus was waiting with medical supplies, his face tight with concern as they emerged from the water, carrying Lyrie, broken tibia, possible fibula fracture as well, he diagnosed after examination. I can set it, but she'll need complete rest for at least 2 weeks. Lur's expression fell. We don't have 2 weeks. The system is failing in multiple places. My skills are needed. Your life is needed, Jack interrupted firmly. We'll find other solutions. As Marcus treated her injury, a commotion arose at the settlement's entrance. Sarah had returned, accompanied by Naren and a dozen northern blue people, including an imposing figure who could only be Kalen, the new tribal leader. His marking patterns were elaborate and vibrant, pulsing with energy that seemed to command attention. More surprising was the group of children with them, blue people, children of various ages, all bearing marking patterns similar to Lyrie's, all wearing breathing assistance devices similar to her original oxygen system. The other defectives, Sarah explained as she approached Jack, or rather the other bridge children, as Kalen calls them. When we explained what Lyrie discovered about the marking patterns being communication with the lake people, they brought every child who showed similar traits. Kalen stepped forward, his tall frame commanding attention. Unlike the previous North leader's jacket encountered, his expression held no arrogance or disdain, only urgency and hope. We bring the ancestral knowledge, he announced, gesturing to several elders who carried ancient-looking artifacts, scrolls, tablets, even what appeared to be memory devices carved from living wood, and we bring those who may help communicate with the ancient systems. The children approached Lyrie with obvious awe, their markings pulsing in tentative patterns that she answered with gentle guidance. Within minutes, they were conversing in the light language, their patterns growing more confident with each exchange. They learned quickly. Lyrie told Jack, her pain momentarily forgotten in the excitement of discovery. Their bodies remember what their minds never knew. The lake people's leader approached, its markings pulsing with what Jack had come to recognize as the pattern for hope. It gestured toward the injured Lyrie, then to the children, then to the central heart machine. They believe with enough bridge people they can stabilize the system while Larry recovers. Naren translated the children's combined abilities, guided by Larry's experience, might be enough. Over the next 3 days, a remarkable collaboration unfolded. The Northern tribe elders shared ancient knowledge from texts long hidden from their own leaders, the lake people. taught the bridge children how to connect with the heart machines. Humans provided technical insights, designing physical repairs where the biological systems had degraded beyond self-healing. Jack found himself working alongside Kalen, combining human engineering principles with the North leaders' deep understanding of Zenora's natural systems. Despite their different backgrounds, they found common ground in their shared concern for the planet's future, and Jack suspected their mutual respect for Larry. She is remarkable. Your daughter, Kalen asked during a rare moment of rest, the question hanging in the air between them. Not by blood, Jack replied, but in every way that matters. Kalen nodded thoughtfully. The old leadership would have seen only her difference. They would have missed the gift within it. His markings pulsed in a pattern Jack couldn't read. Perhaps that is the lesson we must learn, that what we see as flaws are often just differences, waiting for their purpose to be revealed. Lyrie, despite her injury, became the center of this knowledge exchange, translating, teaching, bridging gaps between species and generations. From her recovery bed, she coordinated the bridge children's efforts, her own marking patterns guiding theirs as they learned to interface with the heart machines. Jack watched with quiet pride as she grew into a role none of them could have imagined when she first ran into his workshop seeking refuge. The frightened child had become a leader, respected by 3 different species for her unique abilities. On the 4th day after the chamber incident, the system stabilized. The erratic weather patterns on the surface began to normalize, and the lake people's instruments showed balanced energy flow throughout the network of heart machines. It's not a permanent solution, Lyrie explained to the gathered representatives of all 3 species. The system needs ongoing maintenance, regular input from all 3 peoples to remain stable. Then we must create a new way of living, Kalen declared, not as separate species, but as caretakers of a shared world. The proposal that emerged was both simple and revolutionary. Council with representatives from humans, surface blue people, and lake people working together to maintain the planet systems. The bridge children would be honored rather than outcast, their unique abilities recognized as vital to their world's survival. As the discussions continued, Jack found a quiet moment with Lyrie. Her leg was healing well under Marcus' care, though she would walk with a slight limp for some time. They're talking about making you the head of this new council, he said, settling beside her resting place. Lurs markings pulsed with surprise. Me, I'm too young, too inexperienced. You're the only one who truly bridges all 3 worlds, Jack pointed out. Human-raised, blue people by birth, connected to the lake people through your abilities, he smiled. Besides, you've always been wise beyond your years. She was quiet for a moment, her amber eyes thoughtful. If I accept such a role, I would need to divide my time between all 3 worlds. Jack nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral. Despite the pain in his chest, I understand you found your birth family, your purpose. It's natural that you'd want to explore those connections. Lyrie reached for his hand, her markings pulsing with what he had come to recognize as her particular pattern for affection, one she used only with him. Jack, when I said our family was getting bigger, I meant it. I'm not choosing between worlds or families. Her grip tightened. I want you with me as my advisor, my family, my connection to the Human world, me on the council, Jack asked, surprised. Who better? You've lived on this world longer than most humans. You understand survival, adaptation. Her eyes crinkled in the expression that had replaced her human-learned smile. And you were the first to see value in a defective blue person when her own people rejected her. The offer was unexpected but not unwelcome. Jack had built a life on Zenora that revolved largely around Lyrie and the colonies. Survival, the prospect of contributing to something larger, something that might ensure long-term harmony between the three peoples, held undeniable appeal. I'd be honored, he said finally, though I doubt I'll ever master your light language. You don't need markings to communicate, Lyrie replied. You speak with actions. You always have. 1 month later, the first official gathering of the Trices Council took place at a newly constructed meeting place where the underground lakes met the surface world. A natural cavern had been expanded and modified to be accessible to all three peoples. Areas of water for the lake people, humidity controlled sections for the blue people, and drier regions for humans. The journey to this moment had not been without challenges. The northern tribe's transformation, though largely positive, had faced resistance from those who clung to old ways. The human colony had debated extensively whether deepening their connection to Zenora's native species served their long-term interests, and the lake people had been reluctant to share certain aspects of their technology, fearing it might be misused by surface dwellers. But Lyrie had navigated these complexities with a wisdom that belied her years, addressing concerns with patience and finding compromises that respected each species' needs. Her dual perspective, raised by humans but born to blue people with an innate connection to the lake people, gave her insights no other individual could claim. Jack stood beside Lyrie at the central platform, watching as representatives from all three species filed in. The northern and eastern blue people had put aside generations of differences to present a unified voice. The human colony had sent delegates from each of their major professional groups: engineers, medical staff, farmers, and security. The lake people moved gracefully through specially designed water channels that allowed them to participate fully. The chamber itself was a testament to cooperation, human engineering, blue people artistry, and lake people biotechnology combined to create a space where all three species could function comfortably. Softly glowing organisms provided light, regulated to a level acceptable to all present. Lyrie, as head of the council, would speak first. Despite her youth, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that drew all eyes to her as she stepped forward. Her leg had healed well enough for her to walk unassisted, though a slight unevenness in her gait remained, a permanent reminder of her sacrifice in the flooded chamber. 3 cycles ago, I was a child without a home, without a past, without a people. She began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Today I stand before you as a bridge between worlds, between peoples, between past and future. Her markings pulsed gently as she spoke, complementing her words with the light language that many now recognized as their world's oldest form of communication. Our world was designed to be maintained by all its peoples, working in harmony. When that harmony was broken, when the surface dwellers forgot their connection to the deep, when humans arrived without knowledge of The system, the world began to fail. She gestured to the heart machine node, visible in the chamber's wall now, pulsing with healthy, regular light. Together, we have begun to restore that harmony. Together, we can ensure it never breaks again. As she continued, outlining the council's structure and purpose, Jack felt a presence beside him. It was Naren, now established as Lee's uncle and a key representative from the Northern Blue people. When I first saw her in your settlement, I barely dared hope, he said quietly. Her marking pattern is so distinctively from our family line, but to find her not only alive but thriving, he shook his head in wonder. You gave her something we couldn't, human, a chance to become who she was meant to be. She gave me something too, Jack replied, watching Lyrie with undisguised pride. A purpose beyond survival, a family. Naren repeated, testing the human word. Yes, that fits. Different peoples, different origins, but family. Nonetheless, he gestured to the gathered representatives. Perhaps that's what this council truly represents, not just alliance or cooperation, but the recognition that we are all in the end family to this world. As Lyrie concluded her address, representatives from all three species stood in unified approval. The lake people's markings pulsed in synchronized patterns of agreement. The blue people raised their hands in their traditional gesture of acceptance. The humans applauded in their custom. Three different responses from three different peoples, yet the meaning was the same. Unity, purpose, hope for the future. Jack thought back to that first moment when a small blue figure had crashed into his legs, seeking protection from those who saw her as defective rather than different. How could he have known then that she would become not just his family but a bridge between worlds? The formal ceremony transitioned to celebration, with each species sharing food, music, and customs with the others. The humans had brought fermented beverages that the blue people approached with cautious curiosity. The blue people offered fruits from their mountain orchards, sweet and tangy flavors that complemented the human stronger drinks. The lake people shared bioluminescent organisms that chain color when touched, delighting children from all three species. In one corner, Marcus engaged in animated conversation with a lake person healer, their discussion facilitated by one of the bridge children. Sarah stood with a group of blue people hunters comparing bow designs and hunting techniques. Eliza, the colony's leader, conferred with Kalen about establishing regular trade routes between their settlements. As the celebration continued, Jack found himself drawn to a quiet alcove where water from the underground lake lapped gently against the stone. He needed a moment alone to process everything that had happened, the discoveries, the dangers, the transformations. His life had changed irrevocably, as had the future of all three species on this planet they shared. Hiding, Lyrie's voice came from behind him, a hint of amusement in her tone. Jack turned to see her standing in the entrance to the alcove, her blue form silhouetted against the chamber's glow. Just taking it all in, he replied. It's a lot to process. She moved to stand beside him, gazing out over the water. I keep thinking about that day in your workshop. If those hunters had found me first, but they didn't, Jack said softly. You found me instead. The lake people have a belief, Lyrie said, her markings pulsing gently in the dim light. They say nothing in this world happens without purpose. Every current leads where it is meant to flow. Do you believe that? Jack asked. I'm not sure, she admitted, but I do know that when I ran into your workshop that day, something larger than either of us was set in motion. She turned to face him fully. My parents died trying to save me, but you succeeded where they couldn't. You gave me the chance to become who I am now. And who are you now? Jack asked, genuinely curious how she saw herself after all these revelations. I am Larry, she said simply, Bridgewater of the Blue People, raised by humans connected to the lake people. Her hand found his, but most importantly, I am still the girl you taught to survive on this world, the one you believed in when no one else would. As the formal proceedings transitioned to celebration, each species sharing food, music, and customs with the others, Larry returned to Jack's side. Her amber eyes sparkled with emotion as she surveyed the unprecedented gathering. It worked, she said simply. We're actually doing this. Did you doubt it would? Jack asked with a smile. Many times, she admitted. When I was hiding in your workshop, when I was learning to breathe, when I discovered my birth family had died protecting me. Her markings pulsed with a complex emotion that needed no translation. But then I remembered what you taught me, that strength isn't about never falling, but about rising every time you fall. Jack placed an arm around her shoulders, feeling the strange but familiar texture of her blue skin beneath his hand. I think you've risen higher than anyone could have imagined, Larry. Together they watched as humans, blue people, and lake people mingled in a chamber that symbolized their shared world, not perfect, not without challenges ahead, but united in purpose and understanding. The journey that had begun with a desperate child seeking refuge had led to the birth of a new era. For all three peoples, family protects family, Larry said softly, echoing her words from the flooded chamber. And now, our family includes everyone. Jack couldn't have said it better himself. Their world had indeed grown larger. Their family expanded beyond blood or species, and in that expansion lay the promise of a future brighter than any single people could have achieved alone. A future built on the recognition that strength comes in many forms, and that what some call defects others might recognize as the very bridges needed to connect divided worlds.